There's a whole convoluted story behind it. It wasn't cut and dry. They didn't plan to start a garden at all, and it turned out that they were in the perfect spot in St. Petersburg at the perfect moment in history.
He didn't know when he bought the land for $600 where he would end up.
So in the 90s, they brought in the Kachunga alligator wrestling show.
Okay.
Yeah.
People, when they think of Florida, they think of this lush, tropical
Yes.
place, which really is not true.
And then you had another buyer that really sparked the interest of the community, and that was...
Hello, you beautiful people. Welcome back to Talkin St. I'm your host, Ryan Bogden. Before we dive into today's amazing guest, I want to let you know that this podcast is sponsored by Bogden Homes here at Keller Williams St. Pete. So if you need any real estate needs, you're curious of what your home is worth, you know somebody moving here, or you just have questions, or maybe you just need a landscaper, which is relevant if you think about what we're going to be talking about today, find our contact information in the description below. And now, on to our amazing guest. I have Jennifer Tyson, the Education Director of Sunken Gardens.
That's right, the Sunken Gardens.
I thought that was a good intro for you.
It was great. It was very pumped up. I'm feeling important.
You are important. Yes, you have all the knowledge and greatness of this incredible place that started in the early 1900s that put St. Pete on the map.
Yep.
Is that true?
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
For a long time, people haven't been super aware of the full history, but we've been really thankful to be able to create a history center in our original 1940 entrance building, which has been off limits to the public for decades. So now anybody who comes through the gardens can see this really rich history that spans over 100 years. And it incorporates all kinds of the kitschy, weird, fun Florida that people love, and the resilience of the garden over all these years. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, for the three people who maybe don't know what the gardens are,
Yeah.
could you describe high level? What is Sunken Gardens?
Sunken Gardens is a true gem of St. Petersburg. It's a true gem of Florida as a whole, too, because Florida's really, it's so many people call it weird Florida, right? It's something that Florida's known for, is having these kind of strange people and strange stories.
Florida man,
exactly. And Sunken Gardens was actually started by a Florida man and his wife, Eula. She doesn't always get the credit that she deserves, but we're giving it to her now. So it started back in the early 1900s. In 1903, George Turner came down from Jacksonville, and he started the gardens with his wife. There's a whole convoluted story behind it. It wasn't cut and dry. They didn't plan to start a garden at all, and it turned out that they were in the perfect spot in St. Petersburg at the perfect moment in history to create a juggernaut, a world-renowned attraction where celebrities would come and visit. And that all started from their home garden that they just thought would be for their family. But it took off from there, and really over the 3 generations, it grew massively.
But this is not some average garden, Jennifer.
Oh, no. Yeah, Sunken Gardens is really interesting. Well, first of all, it's sunken. It's 15 feet below street level in what they used to call an ancient sinkhole. And we believe it's probably an ancient sinkhole. We've had a hard time getting...
So what does that mean when you say ancient sinkhole?
Meaning thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years ago, the land collapsed.
Oh.
And like often does in Florida. So you've created a sinkhole, and it's just filled in with water. It's become a mucky area, really one of our wetlands that's so ecologically important. But back then, people could have cared less about the ecological importance of these spaces. So George came down, he was a plumber, and he said, I can drain this and grow the fruit and vegetables that I love, that I grew up growing when I was growing up on a farm in Jacksonville. His wife, Eula, was all about it. She had Grove owner parents, so she grew up that way too. And it was really just their personal piece of land. And George did actually drain it as a plumber, which, again, these days we would never want to do because our wetlands are so precious for cleaning our water, and wildlife value, of course. But at the time, everybody was doing it. It was the time of the land rush here. So someone like a plumber just a working class person could buy and sell land at a fast clip. It was so rapid. And they made good money.
And it was how many acres?
Well, Sunken Gardens is still 4.1 acres.
Okay, and he did. If I'm correct, it was $600 for the purchase, right?
Right. Yeah, and they actually purchased it on Valentine's Day, which was George's 30th birthday. So it's kind of a sweet story. Their love story is so sweet. They wrote letters back and forth to each other, talking about what they'd want to grow if they did create a grove of their own. They talked about raising chickens and maybe even raising a family. So that love
what a
of
simple
nature,
time.
I know, it really was. Hula would talk about, sitting next to a tree with the sea breeze coming in over Coffee Pot Bayou. And that's where she loved to read the most. And now, we can sit on Coffee Pot Bayou and do the same thing ourselves. So
100 years later.
Yeah, it really
120 years later now.
helps tie you to the past.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay. So I like this journey that we're on in the history. So it's the early 1900s. We got this sunken place. It's full of clay and wet, and he drains it. The gardens become when I was reading online that people, when they think of Florida, they think of this lush tropical
Yes.
place, which really is not true.
Exactly.
Right? It's kind of been falsified in the implant of palm trees and things like that.
Yes.
So where did George get, where did all this stuff come from?
So
Because it's not native.
Exactly. I'm so glad you mentioned this, Ryan, because it's a real point of interest that I like to make sure all visitors are aware of, because they'll walk into Sunken Gardens and you hear them as I walk around. Oh, I would love to have my landscape look exactly like this. I want a tropical garden. I want it to look just like Sunken Gardens. And when I overhear that, I'll tell them, hey, I know you do, but keep in mind, there are certain plants that aren't necessarily meant for here. You have to really take care of them. They incorporate a lot of fertilizer and water use, and those aren't necessarily Florida friendly. So ultimately, George Turner, his goal was, at the time, create this lush tropical landscape that he could do specifically in that sinkhole because of all the rich, mucky soil that had been created over thousands of years of fish decomposing in that small lake. Real Florida gardeners know that some of the best fertilizer you can use is natural and organic, and that is oftentimes fish fertilizer. And it smells to high heaven when you first put it on, but then it dissipates. But it's a natural way of getting some nutrients in. So he did that, but he wanted to bring in plants that most people had never seen around here. So he was getting his sources from maybe down in Miami, other nursery owners. He had some contacts. So he would bring in cycads, other tropical plants that a lot of people had never seen here, because our natural land, our natural flora and fauna is completely different from these exotic plants that come from other countries that he created.
Mm-hmm.
And so their advertising as a family was always, come to Sunken Gardens. We're the Florida you want to see. So what we try and temper is people's expectations of, yes, this is incredible. It's tropical. It's beautiful. So many of these plants come from other countries, but that's not the real Florida.
Right.
It's a mirage.
It's a mirage. Yeah, I like that. It's a mirage of what we want it to be like.
Right.
And so at this time, because people, 4th Street was a dirt road, and this became a very off-street attraction. When did it really blow up for them? Was it the 40s, 50s?
Yes, especially the 40s and 50s. Really, when the Gandy Bridge was built in the 20s, that created that link from Tampa to that part of Pinellas, right? And then that goes right into 4th Street. So once 4th Street was paved and Sunken Gardens was already there, they were letting people walk into their home garden. It was their private family garden. In the 1920s, they were planting plants that they just liked. But in the late 1920s, when the land boom busted, because everybody was coming here from all over to buy the land left and right, sell it really fast for a profit. And George Turner was one of those. He was a plumber who grew up on a farm, but he was getting in on the action big time. And everything was going great until there were a couple of hurricanes, severe, and then the freezes that came through. And so people said, I don't know if this is really the best place to live. And the housing market crashed in 1926. And George and Eula and their family of 4 children lost virtually everything, but they still had the Sunken Gardens personal property. So they moved from their very, decent large house down in South St. Pete. It was on the water. They were living well. And then all of a sudden they had to say, what are we going to do? They decided to go back to what they knew, which was growing fruits and vegetables and selling them. So they went back to, they literally with their own hands built a house onto what was considered a shed on the property. And from there, they started growing fruits and vegetables and letting people come in to their papaya farm. Oftentimes after church, they would come through and want to explore the rest of the gardens. They saw beyond. They're like, oh, you've got some paths here. I want to see these exotic plants you've brought in just personally. So they decided, we have a venture here. Let's start charging the money for this. So they did. They started charging a whopping 15 cents.
Woo! Breaking the bank.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
But really with inflation, it's like $15 a day, which is about our average price of admission. And people loved it. They absolutely loved it. And so they realized if they walled in the gardens, they could make it a full-on attraction. So the kids were at play. I mean, they're going around digging these areas that they could make into what they called pools, which are really ponds. They put in koi fish, little waterfalls, multicolored pathways. They really dressed it up and then walled it in. And 1936 was their official first season that they mark as a first season. But they were welcoming in people way before that.
Right. It was kind of like an organic thing that happened. It wasn't a planned thing for them, which is awesome. I always love those stories of like, you don't know, he didn't know when he bought the land for $600 where he would end up.
No idea knowing that 4th Street would become the major thoroughfare. It was right off of 4th Street. So there you have your roadside attraction by default.
Right. You have traffic going by.
Yes.
And at that time, we think about it, there's not like people are listening to radio. So to have a place to go, this attraction, to be outside and see stuff you've never seen before.
Right.
And I was reading, this was obviously before Disney World, because Disney World kind of changed things a little bit,
100%.
right? Because this was the Disney World attraction for Florida.
Yes, it was one of them. What I find so interesting is that they were the pioneers of the early Florida attractions movement. But at the same time, you had another family that was running Weeki Wachee, which is still around, thankfully. Another family that was running Cypress Gardens further into Central Florida. You had a lot of mom and pop attractions getting started at the same time, and they collaborated with each other. They didn't necessarily see each other as competition. It was more like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? And then eventually they created the Florida Attractions Association to show tourists that they were coming to, yes, a roadside attraction, but a legit one, not just some fly-by-night kind of nothing that you maybe want to go see, except for maybe a few gators on the side of the road. They were like, no, this is good quality family entertainment, and you can trust that you're getting a good experience for your money.
So not a lot of people know this, but there used to be animals at Sunken Gardens.
Yes, and you know what? There still are, but not to the degree that it used to be. In the late 60s and 70s and 80s, it really was like a zoo. In fact, George and Eula's sons, Ralph and George Jr., they were the second generation to run it. Then their sons, the third generation. But when the second generation came in, they said, we're going to expand on the flamingos that we brought in 1955. They were hugely popular, so we still have them today. Not the exact same ones.
But the grandchildren.
Yeah, very likely. And in any case, you had the son saying, everybody likes a zoo. Let's bump this up a little bit. And so they created this huge walk-through aviary where you could go through and see these incredible exotic birds all around you. They brought in all kinds, capybaras. There were African pygmy goats. There were monkeys. They had penguins, truly, like African penguins that can live in our climate. So they went wild, creating these really interesting faux stone habitats for these animals. But Unfortunately, as popular as they were, and that really brought in a lot of people over time when things started to shift in people's opinions on what was really entertaining, that became roller coasters and going to Disney. People weren't as enthralled with these animals. And so things started to go a little bit downhill. The money that went into buying premium food for these animals and really caring for them was starting to break the bank. So there are a lot of
That's a
things.
lot more to take care of than plants
Oh,
when you
yeah.
have living animals.
Absolutely. And the plants alone are difficult to take care of because they're not all native
Right.
and they require very specific care. And then we get the freezes that come through. And so there's so many things that almost wiped Sunken Gardens off the map over those 3 generations. And we're really thankful that by the skin of their teeth, oftentimes they barely made it through. And so thankfully we now still have Sunken Gardens and hopefully we'll have it forever.
So you mentioned the freezes, and now I'm curious. So how do you prepare the plants for the freezes? Is there a preparation that happens in the gardens now? And say, because I'm sure you have to watch climate.
Oh yeah, we do. We're always on top of the weather, whether it's a big rainstorm that's coming through or a freeze that's coming through. Now I'll tell you the difference between how we handle it is vast compared to how the Turners did, mainly because of environmental factors. So the Turners and many other people at the time knew what smudge pots were, and they used them readily.
I
They're
don't know.
basically heaters that are run on oil. They're run on kerosene. And so you'd fill them with this oil and burn the oil in order to keep the gardens warm. And they had hundreds of them. So they would just make this roaring sound and really heat the whole gardens. But environmentally, terrible thing. But at the time,
They
people
didn't know.
weren't thinking about this.
This is the 40s, 50s. This is a different time.
Yeah, absolutely. You just did what you had
We were
to
smoking
do.
cigarettes on airplanes. People didn't know what the heck was going on.
You got it. It was Wild West, right here in Florida.
Yeah.
But so now thankfully also over the years, our plants have become so much more mature. So the large palms that we have and the incredible oaks, they all create this microclimate. It's almost like a blanket over the gardens. So when it's cold, it keeps it a little bit warmer underneath. Plus the wall around the gardens and the fact that it's sunken in. It's a really great microclimate for that. And we've realized there's only so much we can really do to protect some of these large specimens. And we do what we can, but it's more of a spot thing. Like we'll move all of our orchids under cover and protect them. So if it's a really cold, sensitive tropical, we'll care for it. But others, we've learned over time that they can sustain it as long as it's not extreme and drastic as far as a cold front comes through, because the Turners, they had the opposite of that. In 1985 and in 1962, they had freezing temperatures that were in the 20s for not just a few hours, but for many, many hours. And so they're bringing out their families in the middle of the night. Hey, everybody, we've got to go out there. We've got to put the smudge pots on and we've got to keep them running all night long. And still, they lost massive amounts of their
You're doing
plants.
great. I can tell. Well, now I'm curious of where did your fascination come into the gardens, because your passion for it is unique and vast, and I can tell you speak on this a lot because you're painting a beautiful picture.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah, no, you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an incredible story that you're telling.
It gets so much deeper.
And so you've been with the gardens for, well, we can keep on that, but let's touch on this a little bit. You've been with the gardens for 10 years?
Yeah, 10 years. Coming up in October, it'll be my 10th year. But I've been going to the gardens since I moved to Florida in 94. So I moved here in high school. My family moved us here, and I was very upset about it. I was in high school. I was a junior. I did not want to leave.
Where'd you move from?
I moved from Texas.
Oh, okay.
So I'm used to the heat. I'm used to the humidity.
Right. But junior year high school, that's a tough time.
Oh, forget it. I was so mad. But coming here, my mom loved botanical gardens and I loved nature. So I was like, yeah, let's go. It became one of her favorite places. So like so many people here in St. Pete, they come through and they say, I've got a membership. I've had a membership for years. This is where my family loves to come, whether it's Mother's Day, a birthday. It's just a special place for special occasions or just a Sunday visit. And that's really how my family looked at it. And I still have pictures of us at certain plants from back then that I can walk around the gardens and see and picture us there. So
Wow.
I learned from a lot of people that my story is not unique. They consider it like their family garden. It means so much to them because they have so many memories that they've created there, whether it's a wedding, whatever it might have been. So it's a real community hub, and people genuinely love it for that. A lot of older people love it still because they were coming down here for vacation from northern states, and they remember coming here every year as a kid, and now they live here. And there's so much nostalgia about
That was
it.
the word I was about to use. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and we work to bring back some of these pieces that might have been lost over the years. So every time people come back, they go, "Oh, you opened up the original 1940 building. We had no idea."
And that's new, correct?
It is.
When did that open?
19, listen to me. I was born back in the 1900s.
No.
It was 2022.
So this is new within the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and you haven't been to the gardens in a while,
check out the History Center. It's incredible. It was something that I worked on for a good couple of years with the family members. They still live in the area. One of them is one of our biggest volunteers. She works in the archives with me. So she's always looking up information. She's found some incredible documents and photos in her attic, some of which she didn't even know existed, and presented them when we were working on the History Center exhibits.
Wow.
So there's never before seen photos, never before seen home video footage of some of the aftermath of these freezes. They're all talking in these short videos about their experiences growing up in the gardens, clapping to get the flamingos to go into their night house because they lived right across the street. Literally, the Turner families lived across the street or on the garden property. So it started as a family venture, and so many families in the area still see it as one of their best places to go.
Well, what I like about it in this story in that is this is definitely the oldest business that I've interviewed. We're now at, what is this, Michael? 75, 76? This is the 75th episode of Talkin St. Pete. And one thing that I've found is that the community of small business owners here is so strong. It's a place where entrepreneurs thrive.
Yes.
And this story is like the seed of where that all started and continues to thrive on. And so let's continue on this journey and story. So it's the 70s, 80s, the 90s come around, and now they think about selling it.
Oh, yeah.
But there was a length of time that they thought about this for a while. So,
Yes.
so walk us through that journey a little bit.
Okay, so as I mentioned, in the late 60s and 70s, they brought in all these animals, and it was booming. And in the 50s, too, there were so many celebrities that would come through because there was spring training going on here. So you've got Yogi Berra coming in with Casey Stengel, and they're taking silly photos with the Miss Sunken Gardens pageant winner. So every year there was a new Miss Sunken Gardens wearing her sash. They were always incorporated into the marketing because the family was a marketing juggernaut. They taught themselves how to care for these plants over the generations, but they also taught themselves how to market the place beyond belief. They had so many interesting ways of getting the word out. But in any case, ultimately, people were coming like crazy, but it started to fade a bit when the highways came through. As with so many roadside attractions, once the interstates started coming through, even the Skyway Bridge, you're now diverting people to a path that's so much faster, so much quicker, and people aren't traveling down 4th Street as much anymore. And so that really took a toll on not only Sunken Gardens, but other roadside attractions and historical attractions. Like there was Tiki Gardens over by the beaches. There was the Aquatarium. There was the Wax Museum over there. They all started to fade. And in the 70s, really the 1979 is when the third generation took over. And things seemed really promising. But that is absolutely at the time that Disney was really taking off. You know, Disney opened in 72, but by 79, they had more than just one property. Now you're eventually starting to get into Epcot and the other parks. So people were staying there longer rather than going to Disney and then fanning out to other parts of Florida.
Right.
And that, in addition to the fact that St. Petersburg was losing its tourism factor, it started to decline. And a lot of people who were here at the time in the 80s and 90s remember, and they'll call it like it was a ghost town. That vibe of really excitement to come here as a tourist was starting to fade. And the family was grappling with that. Revenue was down. The amount of money it took to care for all these animals, much less, I haven't even mentioned, the world's largest gift store that they opened in the 1926 building that was put on the property in 1926. They bought that back from the Coca-Cola bottling plant, who had been running it through the 40s, 50s, 60s. And so
so that was separate from the property.
It was.
Okay.
It was original. I mean, it's on the property, and they had leased the property out to people who were going to run it. And it started off as the world's largest sanitary market, because back in the 20s, having refrigeration in a market was beyond new.
Especially in Florida.
Exactly. It was so exciting. So they called it a sanitary market. Things could stay cold. And it was one of the largest in the Southeast. But it folded after a year.
Wow.
Because remember, 1926 is when the land boom ended. We had the crash.
Yeah. Great Depression.
Yeah, exactly. It was early on for Floridians, before the 30s. And so ultimately, you have all of these struggles, but they overcame each of them. And it was really in the 80s and 90s that things started to go downhill financially. And so the brothers who were running, the third generation brothers, decided, let's shutter the world's largest gift shop, because that's costing a lot of money, and just focus on other things where we can maybe make revenue. And so in the 90s, they brought in the Kachunga Alligator Wrestling Show.
Okay.
Yeah. In the 90s. Like, what?
Yeah,
that feels so recent.
Yeah.
But they did. They created an amphitheater that's still there today. We don't have alligator wrestling anymore. It's definitely frowned upon.
Right.
But at the time, they were going with it, and people filled those stands
To watch alligators wrestle.
Wrestle with.
Did they jump off the top rope?
Well, I'll tell you what. It was really man against beast.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
and-
I can't even picture it.
Well, I can picture it a lot, because I'll tell
sure.
you, the Turner brothers who are running all of this have wild stories about close calls.
Oh, I bet.
Because
I mean, you're dealing with dinosaurs.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're not looking favorably upon being wrestled.
Right.
So in any case, that helped boost attendance for a while, but it was controversial. You have PETA outside, and so in the 90s, they said, this still isn't enough. We need to put this on the market. And it breaks our hearts to do it, but it's just a struggling enterprise. People are going to Busch Gardens. They don't care anymore. So for 10 years, they put it up for sale, but a lot of people didn't want to purchase it. Other than, and this is a classic Florida story, some condos wanted to purchase it, fill in the 15 feet level, deep Sunken Gardens, this treasure, fill it in, create a condo. Thankfully, that fell through. There were some others that fell through as well. And they even tried to get the city to purchase it. But the city officials at the time were like, we're really not in the business of taking over failed private businesses. Just not what we're looking for. And then you had another buyer that really sparked the interest of the community. And that was a nudist colony.
Okay. So it's, where did they come from?
So this got serious.
Yeah.
Ultimately, where they came from, I don't know. But they were very interested, and there was legal paperwork written up that they were going to purchase this property.
And they were going to frolic around the gardens.
Hey, it's walled in.
Yeah.
It's like
why
a Shangri-La.
Why not?
It's
Come join our
incredible.
cult. Take your clothes off. Let's hang
Hey.
out in the gardens.
Absolutely. Well, as a lot of you know, Sunken Gardens is directly surrounded by one of the premier neighborhoods of St. Pete. So you've got Old Northeast.
Right.
And let's just say, we can't say for sure that this was what galvanized the public, but it may have been a big catalyst. people not wanting a nudist colony in their backyard, especially considering their property taxes, etc.
Oh, this is hilarious.
Yeah. So that neighborhood got very involved.
I'm sure they did.
They did. They went door to door, getting people to sign a petition to hopefully have a referendum put on the ballot so that city officials who did not want to buy it would be persuaded to buy it. And it was a long shot, but they got enough signatures. They presented it to city council. And even still, there were years of back and forth. They're like, we really don't want to do this. But they convinced a couple of key players to move along with this and convince the other council members that we really need to save Sunken Gardens. It's a gem. We can't just let it go.
Right.
And
don't let the nudists take over.
Exactly. I mean, it's great, fine, but you don't have everybody getting to enjoy it anymore.
Right.
So really, they put it on the ballot. But that whole story is a whole long thing.
I can imagine.
I won't go into it, but I feel like they should make a movie out of this specific section because it was so close. So they got it on the ballot just in time. Like the ballots were going to be printed for other elections entirely. They got it on the ballot just in time for like the next day for them to go out and people to actually vote on it. And they even thought, people aren't going to vote to tax themselves to buy this historic property. That just doesn't usually happen. So hopes were high, but realistic. Everybody was biting their nails. We have a story from one of the Turner grandsons who was running it at the time, and his wife. They were at Harvey's, which is an institution here, a restaurant that's been around for decades and decades. And they were in the back room watching on the TV with the owner of Harvey's, like watching the returns come in. And they came in, it was a landslide. People wanted to save Sunken Gardens, and enough to tax themselves a one-time property tax to purchase Sunken Gardens. And so now the city owns it as of 1999.
Wow.
And for the last 20 years, we've been working to revitalize it because it had gone in disrepair during those for sale years. They just were like, why are we going to put a ton of money into this?
Right. It's for sale.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of time spent and a lot of volunteers that came in and really spruced it up. And some of those volunteers are still with us today, and they tell us these stories. It's incredible to talk to the people who love Sunken Gardens so much that they want it to be preserved forever. And I really think that's going to happen.
I do too. And this is such a cool story of community, right? Community coming together to save a landmark that cannot be recreated. It's not like you can't make a plant grow overnight, right? You can put a building up in a few years, but you can't make a plant grow to the extent of 100 years the way these plants have been there. So
exactly.
This is a remarkable story. And I think in my mind, I'm thinking, what if they planted the nudists to go out there because I knew, right? I'm like the conspiracy theories,
the first.
Right? Wants me to think like, ooh, that was a good move.
Well, I did say that the Turners were very good at marketing.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
And that's all I'm going to say.
Right. They're like, well, what if?
There's still speculation, and I'm not at liberty to say. But I will say we did find the documents that were written up about it. So
I believe
that's
it.
Real.
I'm just, the writing's on the wall. A little bit. That's cool. That's
at liberty.
Cool. So now that the city has taken over, how has the city, what has the city done with this? Right. Okay. Now we have this property. This is a unique situation. What has happened since 1999?
Okay. Well, first of all, the historic building was in major disrepair. Because remember, they'd closed it to, keep from the overhead. Now, because of that, it really needed a lot of help, and that was going to take a lot of money. And that was daunting, like, oh my gosh, what did we get into with this? But in addition, again, all the plants needed to be revitalized and thinned out. Now, in order to get funding for that, yes, they were able to purchase the gardens, and that's fine. But now, how do you spruce it up? How do you get it to a place where...
Yeah, you need capitalization operation costs.
Right. And so they were able to, thankfully, have some contacts with legislators that were in D.C., that were representatives of Florida, that were able to earmark some money for this. And thankfully so. So they revitalized the 1926 building and reopened it in 2003. And that's phenomenal. So we still have so many of the historic elements of that 1926 building. And then with the gardens too, they brought in a lot of labor to help revitalize it. But It still took time, and it's been taking time. You can only do so much when you have a city staff that's small. It's taxpayer money. And so the positions are allocated very rarely. It took me 2 years to become full-time. I was working part-time and doing everything under the sun. We all wear so many hats while also really, really relying on what the Turners call free labor. They're like, oh, you had all this free labor. We didn't have that. And I said, oh, you mean the volunteers? They're like, oh, yeah. I said, well, we're a city municipality, so
Right.
volunteers want to come.
right.
It's a different story altogether when you're paying a staff.
Correct.
But so with our volunteers and with our Sunken Gardens Forever Foundation, they raise money so that we can revitalize Sunken Gardens and bring the history back little by little. So whether it's our succulent garden that we put in that pays homage to this incredibly huge Oregon cactus that they had for years and years and put in all these postcards, or whether it's bringing in flamingos when we were down to just 2 in 2016, they led this great fundraising effort to bring in about 20 more flamingos from the San Antonio Zoo. And that they'd been working on that for years. They're flock animals. It's sad to see just 2 left.
Right.
So they brought those in. They helped majorly fund the History Center, in addition to a grant that we got from the state of Florida, Historical Resources. So it's truly a community effort to keep it going, and not only keep it going, but bring it back. So when the Turner family members do come back, the ones who sold it, they tell us so often, we're so glad that the city finally purchased it and that y'all are doing an incredible job. And they can walk through and tell us their memories, but they feel themselves that their legacy lives on. Not only theirs, but their grandparents, George and Eula, who they have such fond memories of. It's their whole family legacy, and they can be so proud of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And you can feel your passion for it. I mean, to be there for 10 years and tell the story so beautifully as you have, Jennifer. I mean, hats off to you because you're a part of this. You're a big part of this.
That's it. Like, I tell the people that work there, whether they're volunteers or staff, I often say, we're in charge of leading this ship now. The Turners did it for all these years and almost lost it several times themselves. Some crazy stories. But we're running it now, and we're a part of that history, which is so exciting to me because not a lot of people get that opportunity.
So in helping it stay alive, and there's events that happen.
Mm-hmm.
What do people use the gardens for?
Okay, well, I'll tell you, my role in events is creating educational programs, whether it's talks or festivals. So we just had our Plantapalooza festival, and that's incredible. That was started by other community members, small, right out of their houses. And they said, we're on our 3rd year. We really want to bump it up. Can Sunken Gardens host it? Now, Plantapalooza is based on native plants and spreading the word about how important they are for backyard diversity and et cetera, et cetera. I said, yes, this is my mission. I also work for the Florida Wildflower Foundation. And so really getting the word across that we need these native plants everywhere as much as we can. I was like, yes, let's do it. So those are the kind of things that I will do, whether it's a workshop, class, or something like that. But a lot of our revenue comes from weddings. We are a wedding hub, but we've been a wedding hub since the 1930s.
Wow.
The Turner family, almost all of them have some sort of tie to either getting married in their own gardens or having their reception in the gardens. So it started off as a family tradition, but it's been open to the community to do that for decades and decades. And people feel really special there because we have a wedding lawn. It's been called the wedding lawn for years. There's hearts that are from the 1930s that are put into the sidewalk leading up to it. So you really feel like you're in this land of love in a way that was really started with the love between George and Eula and wanting to create this special place for them and their family.
That's special.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. What other type of events are there? So weddings are a big one. You do educational events. Are there any other types of events that happen?
We have, I forget the date. I'll have to look it up. But our Orchid Festival is coming up in April. We have that every year. It's incredible. We're bringing in vendors from all over the state. It's packed. People
Is
can.
that online? Because I want.
Yeah,
it's
online. I think oh, is it April? It's in April. But in any case, we have our Flamingo Festival.
Orchid Festival is April 6th.
Thank
10
you.
to 4.
Great. Yes. Come out. It's incredible. You've never seen so many orchids all together for sale in your life. And there's talks that go on too. So if you're not really sure how to care for an orchid, or if you're a pro and you're like, I just really want to know the nitty gritty on how do I hybridize these, like get really into it, there are speakers, expert speakers for each of these levels all throughout the day, which is great.
That's cool.
Yeah. So we'll also have, community meetings. We have garden groups that come through. So just like it's always been, it's a community hub. It's for tourists, but it's also a community place where people who live in St. Pete and the broader Tampa Bay area can feel a sense of home in a place that isn't technically their home.
Yeah, no, it's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool. I just being a staple on 4th Street, the rich history behind it. The story is remarkable, and it's really cool that now there's a place, to go learn this history, not just from you, but
right.
And I'm sure the journey for you, like it's more than a job for you. You can tell it's a passion of learning and history.
It really is, because so many of these places, so many of these historic sites throughout Florida are being torn down. They're being developed. I feel like so many people who come to Florida, they, may have in their mind, oh, kitschy Florida, it's fun, but to not necessarily have a reverence for it or a true appreciation for it. And it's a reason why so many people love living here. And so when you destroy historic buildings and historic gardens or other landscape areas, you never get them back. And you can put up some cookie cutter development. Does it have any soul? I don't know. That's up to you to decide. But I will say that
Jennifer, you're pretty opinionated about that.
I love
it. I love it.
I've seen so many historic properties destroyed for a new modern building. Fine. You can never get those buildings back. And I feel like if there's anything that I would like to improve about St. Pete, that's one of them, is really having people understand why it's so important to keep and to love it. Because if you don't love something, you don't care to save it. And you can't love something until you've experienced it.
Well, and know the history,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you come across a place and you have nothing, and you don't know anything about it,
Mm-hmm.
you would never understand
Exactly.
the significance and the story behind it and all the memories that are attached to a place.
And how you can also become a memory, how that can become important to you, whether it's the State Theater, so many memories of the State Theater. And I'm so glad that it's been restored to its original grandeur. Same thing with Sunken Gardens. The Vinoy Hotel, that was in disrepair for years. There
Now it's
were
beautiful.
vagrants living in there. And it always comes down to a group of people, however small, that care so much. But the more people can be exposed to these and experience them themselves, then you get that core memory, that core experience that then ties you to that place. It means something to you personally.
Yeah. Oh man, this is like kind of giving me chills a little bit just thinking about it, because I love learning. Like, I've only been in St. Pete since 2021.
Okay.
And, through these conversations, I've learned so much about the city, of how it's transformed downtown and this, like, I have so many stories from all different walks of life and business owners and people that, are taking care of the Pinellas Trail, and now the gardens, and, the businesses that the one business that showed up downtown on Central that helped another business that came in, and then it transformed a whole area. So just to learn more about the rich history that's here is awesome, and kind of gives this show an opportunity to help with the future.
Right.
Yesterday we had a conversation with Mike Sweezy, CEO and president of Economic Urban Development, and that's a big part of our conversation of what is the future and what are we doing that we don't grow too fast to lose our character.
Yes. You said it. To me, that is one of the most important questions that we can ask ourselves as we move forward in this city.
Yeah,
sure.
I'm pretty passionate about that.
Good.
Because I think that the reason people are moving here could be the exact detriment to the demise of why they moved here.
They love it too much.
They love it too much, but change is always inevitable. So we just got to make sure we're changing for the good.
Exactly. And you know what I see as such a good marker of this is the fact that we've preserved, well, first of all, the waterfront. So the waterfront was originally developed, but the developers who did so said, you know what? We're going to keep this area public. It could be completely private. Look at all these mansions we're building. They would probably like it to be private for them. He said, no, this is going to be public. And it still is, that people can experience these beautiful green spaces and waterfront spaces, whether it's over by the pier, Straub Park, or whether it's Boyd Hill Nature Preserve or Weeden Island or Sawgrass Lake. We're the most densely populated county in the state.
With the most water access.
Yes, with the most water access. So the more we can preserve these areas, and also, I'll just put a little plug in this, keep our home landscape care methods as environmentally friendly as possible to preserve our waterways, the better we'll be. So protecting these green spaces that are so rare now is, I think, a really big question. It's not just historic buildings, it's also these natural lands that can never be replaced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, with that, a lot of people like to use seashells in their gardens instead of mulch.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard from the city that that's actually like really frowned upon.
Yeah, it's definitely detrimental. It doesn't do anything for the soil. And a lot of people think that it will suppress weed growth.
But it actually
Nope.
encourages it.
Yeah. And people, that's the other thing too, weed cloth. They put the weed cloth down first, and then if you've taken a walk around any of these neighborhoods, you'll see some of these gravel or seashell landscapes that just look like hell because you can't
Because there's nutrients in the seashells that is feeding the weeds.
Yeah, and the weeds come through no matter what.
Yeah.
So yeah, my recommendation, and so many of the experts' recommendation, is if you can plant native. Native plants are absolutely, they've evolved with our really challenging soil conditions, climate. And so that's one of the reasons we've kept so many of them in the gardens. It's absolutely wonderful to have tropical plants too. I do myself. When I started my own personal garden, before I knew anything about native plants, I thought the same thing. I want my garden to look just like Sunken Gardens. It's got to be full on tropical. I didn't realize that very summer when I went whole hog, we weren't going to have hardly any rain at all.
Oh, no.
And I was so depressed. I'd spent so much time and energy trying to grow these plants, all this fertilizer, all these things that I did not know were horrible for our waterways, only to find out later, well, native plants are so easy to grow if you have them in the right conditions. They still need some maintenance. But if you can incorporate them both and pick Florida-friendly tropicals that you love, but they're Florida-friendly, they don't take a lot of that water and fertilizer, and incorporate natives, it's going to be so much easier on you. You can like set it and forget it for a lot of these plants, and you can watch the wildlife that you're supporting, because especially in urban areas, a lot of our native pollinators, birds, they're having a hard time finding what they need, because when we use plants from other countries, our Florida wildlife and pollinators, they didn't evolve with those plants from China. They're like, what is this? What is this alien plant? And so they're desperately looking for the Florida plants that can support them. And you can bring in this wildlife, these beautiful butterflies and birds to your yard, and you don't have to worry about cleaning out a bird feeder. They're just natural bird feeders.
Oh, you made so many good points there. So many good points. Yeah, but we try to create this. I love the word that you used earlier, mirage.
Mm-hmm. Shangri-La.
Yeah, how things should look, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not native, it actually takes a lot more effort to make that happen.
Yeah, and sometimes it's detrimental effort to the environment.
Right.
So, but not always. I never like to be somebody who says, you've got to go 100% native. That's not me. I love gardenias. I love so many tropical plants, but I'm picking the ones that I know aren't going to hurt our environment.
Mm-hmm.
And those are often the ones that we have in Sunken Gardens too.
Well, you're a great example and very rich in information. What have we missed about the garden? I know there's so much, but for everyone listening, what should they know about the gardens that they don't, that we haven't covered?
Oh, good question. I would say, first of all, if you want to volunteer, I am also the volunteer coordinator. And
how many hats do you wear?
oh, I can't count. Oh my gosh. Well, a lot, but yeah, volunteer coordinating is one of them, and people love the gardens. They want to help out, and we don't always have a lot of positions available because of that. But the ones that we do, the ones that come regularly, they've made Sunken Gardens their home, and we're so glad. So many of them have this expertise that we would pay buku bucks to access, but they give it to us for free, whether it's orchid care, whatever it may be. In addition, the Sunken Gardens Forever Foundation that I mentioned earlier, they're often looking for board members to be on their foundation to help fundraise to support a lot of the things that the city won't fund. So I've been telling you about a lot of great initiatives, things like that. But because it's a city entity, the budget's tight. And so they say, well, yeah, you can replace the roof, you can do the things that need to get done. But these extra things, you're going to need to find funding elsewhere. And so it really has been a community effort to not only preserve the gardens, but keep them going and help us bring back the historical elements as we can over time. Yeah. And we have an incredible staff too. They love the gardens as much as I do. And you see it when you see them. Most of them have been there for years and years. There's not a lot of high turnover. It really is like a second.
It's another family.
Yeah. And I know a lot of corporations will say that and people roll their eyes, understandably. But Sunken Gardens it's a different ballgame entirely. And I would just say, if you come, definitely check out the History Center. You'll see a lot that brings it to life to you. And in particular, it's just so fun to see the celebrities that would come through.
It's just a funny thing to think about, right? Like now you think celebrities are coming to the garden to hang out. But the 50s, 60s, what a different time. Would you say that was the pinnacle and the height of the garden? Other than now, of course, because they're awesome now. But from when the Turners had it?
Yeah, in the 40s, you had all these pageants, and that was huge. People were coming in for these pageants. That happened everywhere. And they had models that would come through and say, hey, photographers and photography clubs, come out and you can take pictures of not only our incredible plants, but also these beautiful girls. But that was standard throughout Florida's tourism industry. You had the Weeki Wachee mermaids. You had the cypress gardens, bathing beauties on water skis. So
it's funny, sex sells. And it's so funny because if you go to the St. Pete History Museum and there's that room in the back which kind of goes through all the history, and there's an old tape that plays that was promoting St. Pete. And there's this funny scene where all these girls in like the 50s, like the bathing suits pop up. And I can't remember the exact way it said it, but just the way the narrator described like, oh, and the great scenes that are here.
Yes.
I was like, you couldn't quite say it the same way today, but it was hilarious. It was just hilarious.
Yeah, not PC at all, but completely the standard back then.
Right.
We were not alone. So that was the 40s, and then into the 50s, that continued on. And it's really the 50s and 60s where a lot of the celebrities would come through. Like I mentioned, Yogi Berra, Casey Stengel, but also Jonathan Winters. Oh gosh, who's the golfer? There's a drink named after him.
Oh, Arnold Palmer.
Arnold Palmer came through. I mean, Danny Thomas. There were so many because a lot of them were vacationing here or doing spring break here.
Down here to golf.
Yeah. So that was definitely a pinnacle. But 1972 is really when they hit the highest numbers of attendance. But ironically, that's also the year that Disney came to be. Really,
so it was like this clash, this pinnacle moment in history.
Yeah, and the family was so excited though. They were like, "Oh, Disney's coming!"
Right, because they thought that would draw more people.
They did, and you know what? It did. The first year or so, it did, and then it started to peter.
Right, because then people thought Florida, they just go to Orlando, they don't leave.
Exactly. Yeah. So it went downhill from 72 down on through the years, but now we're back up to those 72 numbers.
That's incredible.
So people, this is something I will say. And you're like, what do people need to know about Sunken Gardens? So many people drive by Sunken Gardens on 4th Street and they look at it. They don't really know what it is because the parking lot is what you see first.
Yeah, you don't realize how big it is from the street.
Yes. And they're like, well, what even is this? So when they come in, they're like, oh my, this is incredible. You're going 15 feet below street level. You're surrounded by this wall, these incredible mature plants. You feel like you're getting lost in a rainforest. The outside noise of the city fades away, which is incredible. We're only a mile north of downtown. And beyond that, I think people really wonder about Sunken Gardens because it was on the chopping block for so long. So people who've been here for a while still kind of think of Sunken Gardens as struggling to keep it going. And I always tell them, look, we're good.
You're thriving.
We are thriving just as well as we did in 1972 when we were at our peak.
That's
People
awesome.
really respond to it now.
Is there any ever I don't know, any like fundraising or nonprofit events, just like community events that happen?
Yes. So a lot of nonprofits and community events will be held at Sunken Gardens, whether they're outside of the gardens and don't really have an affiliation with us. They can rent the space that we have. Or a lot of them have been held by Sunken Gardens Forever Foundation for the gardens at Sunken Gardens. So if you check out their website through our website, you can check that out. Their social media, our social media, we work hand in hand. So you can learn how to get more involved in that if you're interested, and just how to donate money if you really love Sunken Gardens and you want to continue to see it thrive, whether it's feeding our birds, since we do still have plenty of tropical birds and flamingos. Here's another thing I want to say real quickly if there's time.
No, you have the time. The stage is yours.
Oh, great. Okay. Ultimately, a lot of people will come in and they'll see our exotic birds and think, oh no, these poor birds, they're in these animal habitats. They're not free to fly. And we have to tell them, we've got signage too. A lot of people don't necessarily read it. We really want to make sure they understand that most of these birds, other than some that have been grandfathered in, are birds that are coming from homes that can no longer take care of them.
Right.
They're rehomed. We get calls all the time from people who wish that we could take their exotic bird because they take so much care. They live into their 70s sometimes.
The birds do.
Yes. People go into this thinking, I'm going to get a great bird. It'll be so fun.
I don't know that new birds live that long.
Yeah, a lot of people don't.
These are some old birds out there.
Yes, they are. And I think our oldest is in her 60s.
Wow.
So, yeah, I want people to know that we care for these birds like they're our own family. And the reason they're there is because they don't know how to fly. They've never had the chance as young birds to even develop the strength in their wing muscles to learn to fly. A lot of them have never been around other birds before because they were just in a small cage with a family. So they come to Sunken Gardens. We have to get them acclimated to seeing other birds of their kind. So we care for them so much. They get so much enrichment throughout the day. And I really want that point out there. I don't want people seeing Sunken Gardens because we're an older historic attraction thinking that we care for our animals the way people cared for animals 50 years ago.
Right.
Because it is not the same
That's
at all.
2025 and you're up with the times.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good. I just learned something new. I mean, I learned a lot new, but I did not know birds live to be 70 years old.
Oh boy, they can, especially these exotic birds that
What
people
a commitment.
Exactly, and people don't fully realize it.
I mean, even if you have a child, you only have it for maybe for 20 some years.
Right.
You
and
know, you take care of a bird forever.
Right.
That bird's going to outlive you.
Yes, and it does. And that's why we get a lot of these calls. They say, my mother passed and we don't know what to do with her bird because it only bonded with her. It wants to bite us. It's tearing out its feathers. It's squawking all the time. It's miserable. What do we do?
So intelligent.
They have the mind of a 3 or 4-year-old child.
Wow.
So you have to keep them constantly engaged, and they crave interaction because they're flock animals. So if they're by themselves, they now look at their owner as either their mate or a part of their flock. And so when you leave to go to work, they're often miserable. You go to vacation, good luck getting your friend to come and take care of it, not having their finger bit off.
Right.
So
this is crazy.
Yeah. So we
it's just the things you don't think about on a regular basis.
Yeah.
When it comes to bird care.
Yeah. Leave it to the professionals at these organizations that can care for them.
Yeah.
Don't get one yourself if you don't have to.
Wow. Okay. Well, Jennifer, when you're not at Sunken Gardens doing this, and let me just hats off to you because this is a very rich conversation.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
No, it really has been. I have just been like, I feel like I'm at the History Center just, and I get front row seats. This is incredible. So
Great.
thank you for all you do.
Absolutely.
How do you spend your time when you're not there?
When I'm not there, I'm traveling to other historic old Florida sites because I have a deep love for them. I'm going to a lot of the natural areas here in St. Pete, the ones that I mentioned, Weeden Island, Sawgrass Lake, Boyd Hill Nature Preserve, the waterway, the waterfront parks. To me, those are the real gems of St. Pete, and we're so lucky to have them. So I'm doing a lot of that, but I also go dancing. I'm into roots music and rockabilly.
Ooh,
So
rockabilly.
yeah, rockabilly. So think Elvis, but think modern bands that
Okay.
harken back to that.
Okay. This is cool.
So yeah, and dancing. It's
Yeah.
just a great, like, I love history. I love local history. I love nature, and I love supporting Florida's extremely fragile ecosystems. So I also work for the Florida Wildflower Foundation.
Wildflower Foundation.
Right. And so it's a nonprofit group that helps maintain and restore roadside wildflowers through the state, but also incorporate them into school and library gardens, public display gardens, educational materials. They have an incredible website too. So if you're interested in growing Florida native plants, they're a fantastic resource. So
One question I didn't get to ask you. What's your background previous to the gardens?
So previous to the gardens, I was immediately before the gardens, I was at the Tampa Bay History Center in Tampa, downtown Tampa, and I was there for about 7 years. That was phenomenal. I did basically the same job, running education programming for youth especially, but also booking tours, volunteer programming. So there was a lot in there.
So this was an easy transition for you.
Yeah, especially because I knew Sunken Gardens and had been going so regularly as, just a guest and loved it. But prior to all that, I taught middle school history and geography and civics.
Makes sense.
For about 7 years as well. So I love educating. I love educating kids, adults about things that I think are so important that they also think are important, but may not have developed a real love for. So I want to expose people to them so they can love them and protect them.
Well, you're a gift to St. Pete, and we're lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you so much. You're a gift.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
No, you really, really are. So when's your birthday?
December.
So it's December.
Mm-hmm.
We're in St. Pete. Where are we going for your birthday dinner?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, let's see. I'm not a big, kind of fancy sort of dining person.
It doesn't have to be. This is your birthday.
Yeah.
This is your show. Where are we going?
I'll tell you, I don't know about dinner, but one of the things that I love for dessert that's kind of fun for me is, if they still even sell it, at the Vinoy, they have this creme brulee. I love creme brulee. And I love sitting on their veranda where you can look out over the water and see the boats, but you're still far away enough from the crowds and the traffic to just feel, and you're surrounded by this 1920s grandeur since they've restored it.
Oh, it's beautiful.
So that's one of my favorite places. I would go there on my birthday for sure.
Love that.
Yeah.
Are you taking a book?
Yeah, I could take a book if I wasn't there with family and friends.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, sometimes it's hard for me to read when I'm around so much beauty.
Right, you're taking it all in.
Yeah, even people who read on the beach, I'm like, what are you doing? It's so beautiful all around you. What are you doing? I get it, but it's not something I can usually tune into. But as far as books go, there's one I'm reading right now, has nothing to do with any of what we were just talking about, but it's a book by Kathleen Hanna, who's the lead singer of Bikini Kill, which is a punk rock band back in the 90s especially. And her story is incredible, how she came up in this male-dominated field, eventually married a Beastie Boy, but what she went through to just get through her childhood, but also break into the music business to share her passion. It's really fascinating. So that's a great book I'm reading right now.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, your passion is rich and deep, and so it makes sense for you to gravitate towards those that have it. And it's really, really cool. I love what you're doing.
Thanks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I always ask the food question. That's a big question I like to ask everybody.
Yeah.
I want to do one more thing in the essence of Sunken Gardens, because we talked about the Orchid Festival, which is April 6th. But before that, on March 22nd, we have the Petals and Pulp Botanical Garden paper making pop-up.
Right.
I just want to go through a couple of these.
Sure.
April 13th, Familia de Flamingos. What's that
Yes.
about?
Okay,
That
so
because that's a 2-day event.
yes. So American Stage here, phenomenal production company. They are partnering with us to bring one of their traveling children's musicals to life. It's about a family of migrant flamingos because flamingos migrate, right? And so the story is about this family and what they overcome, and it's going to be held in our amphitheater, which was originally used for alligator wrestling, just a few feet from our flamingos. So we're hoping to have the flamingos out those days, but I'll tell everybody, it's on our website too. We're concerned about the bird flu that's going around, and that can be transplanted to our birds through the wild birds that come through. So we have some incredible, egrets and herons that come through, and they like to share the ponds with the flamingos, and it looks super cute. You're like, oh, this one doesn't belong.
Right.
But it's completely at home here. But unfortunately, they're the ones that are spreading this bird flu. So we're keeping the birds in for the time being. For most of the day, they still get their outside time, but those times aren't necessarily regular. So I just want everybody to know who's listening to this, double check the website before you come to Sunken Gardens. If you're super into the birds, you might want to wait until they're back full force. But we do still have some out on display, our macaws, and they're being walked around by our staff. So you may still get to see a couple of birds, but not to the extent as we've had before. We just really want to protect them.
Dang bird flu.
I know. It's just messing everything up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. For the listeners that are still with us, Jennifer,
Mm-hmm.
what should they comment below so we know they're still here? What's
Oh.
one word, 2 words?
Oh, good question. Sunken Gardens forever, baby.
Sunken Gardens forever.
Mhm.
Yeah. No. Go. If you haven't been, go. And if you have been, go again. Go check out one of the events.
Something blooming at all times of the year. People ask that all the time.
Yeah.
When do I come? When is it best? All the time.
All the time. Something different. Go ground yourself in the gardens.
Yes.
Love that.
Do
Love
it.
that. Well, I appreciate you, Jennifer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for
those of
having
us
me.
that are still with us, comment Sunken Gardens forever. Like, subscribe, share with a friend, and go check out Sunken Gardens. Thanks, everyone. See you on the next one.